hours across the entire year. I logged all of my hours on this app called Amni. You can see all of it here. I don't have all the screenshots, but I basically put all the screenshots into ChatGPT and it calculated 207.9 hours. That's total study time across the entire year, and that is not going to a single lecture. So I only went to the induction lecture, which was around like 30 minutes. I left halfway through because I wasn't finding it useful. So that's pretty much the total investment that I actually spent doing anything that was university related, because I was running a business on the side. So you can see that's overall I think that comes out to 30 minutes a day or 45 minutes a day, something like that. It wasn't too difficult. 6 hours a week maybe. I'm not good at quick maths unfortunately, but you can see like you can do very little amount of work and still pass. So with the exam I got around 63%. The pass mark was 53%. There's no grades in medicine, you either pass or you fail, and that's pretty much it. So I'm not going to say that I did amazing, because there were people who got 80-90%. I did enough to pass, and I was able to focus my attention on other things, right? So again, I'm improving myself. I do think next year I'm going to aim to do a similar amount of work and get a higher score, or even less work and get a similar score ideally. And this is for anyone who is actually taking their A-levels or going into med school next year, or even taking their GCSEs. I think there's a lot of work that you guys can do in terms of improving your study skills, so you can work more efficiently, so you can spend more time doing other things and still get the grades that you want. Okay. Another sort of aside on that, I spent a lot of my year 12 building these study skills up, so I didn't really have to spend any time during med school trying to learn these skills. In terms of my actual A-levels, it was a similar story. I spent around 3 months, the last 3 months before my A-levels. That was the only time I actually studied, and that was like my first time actually learning the information on the course, because I wasn't paying attention in class a lot of the time. My attendance was around 40%, etc. And I learned all of that in 3 months, and I didn't spend anything more than 2 hours a day. And obviously it's a bit more intensive, 2 hours a day, but when you're not really, I mean, school is it's not that long. You come home, you spend 2 hours a day for the last 3 months, and I got 3 A's, which got me my A-levels, if that makes sense. So on this channel, and from my perspective, the main goal of everything here is to be as efficient as possible, so you can spend time doing other things, because studying can be enjoyable, but I don't like studying 10 hours a day, and many of my peers are doing that. Many of the people who got the same grades as me were studying 6 hours a day, right? So what I want to overview is exactly how to do all of this, and there's a lot more depth than something that you can just learn in one video, but you can start implementing a few of these things immediately. So again, I'm not going to say that I'm the best student. I only got 63%. I think I definitely could have done much better if I was a bit more on top of it, and if I was actually a bit more on the ball, if that makes sense. But I didn't take any notes, so all I do is a mind map. Okay, you can see this is a screenshot of my entirety of year 1 medicine. Now you can see that if you zoom in, there is a lot of information clustered into this area, but then there's a lot more sort of scattered information around the site. Okay, not a single note, and again, I didn't go to any lectures. If you zoom in a bit more, you can carry on seeing more and more information. Okay, and when I'm going into the exam, this is almost all stored in my head. That is a goal with a mind map like this, and obviously these are sort of, it's not going into intense depth, but there is a lot of information on here, and it's showing how different subjects and things like that relate to each other, and you're able to go into the exam knowing the majority of the things that you need to be able to apply these techniques, etc. So it's going to be very useful for things like A-levels, and even if you're going into med, or if you're going into any uni degree, all of this applies. Okay, Even with maths, even though, like, okay, you're not necessarily going to do a mind map with maths, but you have to think in the same way. You have to look at relationships and things like that. So if you guys are aware of Bloom's taxonomy, this is something you might want to look up. There is this idea of there's a triangle and there's different levels of learning. Okay, at the top is evaluate, underneath that is analyze, and to be honest, I forget what is below that. But these are called higher order learning, right? And below that is sort of like things like retrieval, right? And this is something that a lot of people get trapped in. You might be aware of this, is Anki flashcards. Okay, so whatever degree you're doing or course you're doing, you might have 1,000, 6,000 flashcards that you have set, and you might want to memorize all of that, right? What you're doing there is you're just memorizing key facts. You're not linking them, you're not analyzing them, or you're not evaluating them, right? So that makes it very difficult for you to actually apply that information in a situation. A lot of exams are not going to ask you for facts. They're not going to ask you what is the name of the this area on the stomach or something like that. A lot of them are going to ask you more evaluative questions, and that's how they differentiate between the top students and the bottom students, right? So when you're studying, you want to be working in these two levels of evaluate and analyze, right? And you can actually see this in what does evaluate mean? It's when you're comparing ideas, or you're looking at an idea of, so let's say you're learning about a certain drug in medicine, and you're learning about receptors, right? When you're evaluating, you're actually thinking about, like, first of all, why am I learning about this? Why is it important to me as, let's say I'm going to be a doctor? Why is it important? And then what other things could it relate to? That's analyzing. So you're just looking at the relationship. So this drug might be related to the kidney, but it might also be related to the stomach. And then when you're learning about, for example, anatomy as well, maybe you see that there's similarities. Maybe the stomach cells have some similarities with the kidney cells. And when you're thinking about these things, immediately this is going to get locked in. If you find a similarity between these two things, you're going to remember that. You're not going to have to do Anki flashcards to try and remember that. Your brain's just going to think that this is important because there's a similarity there. Okay, so that's what analyzing is, and that's the first step that you want to get down. Is when you're building a mind map, you want to build relationships about different areas of the topic. So if you're doing chemistry as well, I did chemistry A level like 2 years ago now, but I did the same thing. And there's loads of different topics that you can make relationships between, and they're going to stick in your head a lot easier without having to do as much work. Whereas, like, with a flashcard, you might take 3 hours to get everything memorized. You can do this in 15 minutes. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Evaluating is when you're thinking about, okay, why is this even important? Thinking even more like a researcher and someone who's actually on the cutting edge of this, like, what other discoveries could this lead to? Making hypotheses about what this might happen, things like that. That's just a broad level overview. I want to actually go into some details of what can you actually do to start implementing, and how can you actually start learning more efficiently and saving time, if that makes sense. So this is my sort of system, and you can see I was going to try and give you like step by step, but it's quite difficult because all of these things are related to each other, right? So the first thing, the most important thing, and I didn't do this very well on my first year because I was quite distracted, but that's pre-learning, okay? And what that means is going through the entire course content at a simple depth. So the analogy that we like to use for pre-learning is, if you think about like PhD level biology, right? Let's say you want to learn PhD level biology, but you've never done biology before. So what is going to be the fastest way to get up to PhD level biology? Are you going to go straight away and start reading research papers, or are you going to start on, let's say, fundamental biology, like year 3? Not year 3, I don't know when they start biology, like year 7 biology, right? Fundamentals. And then you move up to GCSE level biology, and then you move up to A level biology, and then you move up to degree level biology, right? So what's going to be the fastest way? Well, yeah, you're going to have to start from the basics. Okay, you're going to have to start if you look at how your progression has gone in terms of learning these subjects, you always start with a very broad overview. You learn about cells, maybe you learn about chromosomes, maybe you learn about, first of all you learn about the different cell types, right? Then you're learning about different things like, from different areas of biology, because then there's like the ecology part of biology, which is like if we're looking at like how animals interact with each other and how plants move, like chemotaxis and things like that. But there's loads of different areas of biology, but you learn it to a surface level depth first, and then you keep layering and layering and layering on top of it until you get to PhD level biology. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. That's what you want to do with whatever subject you're going to do. You're going to pre-learn it to the most fundamental level, and if you look at like what that would have meant for me, I don't have a screenshot of my early mind map, so I'm just going to zoom in here. You can see there's lots of detail around here, but I would have looked at the most important things. So I would have actually, ideally, what I'm going to do for year 2 is I'm going to, because I've got someone else's notes this time in terms of like what's going to come up in year 2, I'm going to skim through the entirety of the year's notes, and I'm going to look at what relationships can I find. So for year 1, you can see there was a section on lungs. This was a pretty big part. Then you had a big part on the heart. You had a big part on the stomach. You had a big part on the GI tract, and you can see there was also a good amount of linkage around here, which is all to do with like different neurotransmitters and things that those can cause. You've got a big section on immunity, and those are like the biggest chunks. So I'd try and learn those to a surface level of depth. I'm not going to learn them fully, but as much as I can, try and understand them, and then try and make some links between them. And that's what I do. I'd build a skeleton. That's what pre-learning is called, or priming. But priming is slightly different, but pre-learning is, you build a skeleton. So you want to have like a very rough mind map of how things relate to each other, right? And then what you're going to do is, you, as the lectures are coming out, as you're going to the classes, you start layering information on top of this mind map. So I've done all of this, and now I come to the actual lectures, and they're teaching me about, let's say, the GI tract. I start putting in more information that is relevant to this GI tract, and that's also going to help me build some more ideas on here, some more hypotheses as well, about what could be happening in the stomach, what other things am I going to learn about the brain, etc., etc. Right? Because all of these are links. Every subject you do, there's always going to be links between the different topics that you do. So yeah, you first want to build out a skeleton of a mind map. This is for any sort of subject that you're doing. And then every time you come to a lesson, first of all, you're going to look at what topic is going to be covered in this lesson. You make sure that you're sort of primed to come into that lesson, so you write down maybe some questions that you might be able to think about, that you're curious about, that you might want to learn in that lesson. Look at the learning objectives that are going to come up as well. Give some hypotheses about what you might think could occur. So maybe start actually drawing onto the mind map your hypotheses, like this is what I think the answer to this learning objective is, etc., etc. Right? And then when you come to lesson, you correct those and fix the mind map. And you're basically, what you're building here is a schema. This is exactly how your brain thinks. So you're actually drawing out all of the relationships about this entire subject, and you're thinking through it in that way, if that makes sense. So that's the main thing. You're pre-learning and you're layering as you're coming into lesson. Ideally, again, if you have access to the notes and you can cram all of this at the start of your term, which is what I'm going to plan to do, then you can do all of this layering and getting ahead of the curve at the start, and then when you're watching these lectures, it's just revision for you, if that makes sense. The second thing is, so I mean, I've sort of mentioned these as well. So chunking is just basically doing a mind map and making big chunks. That's related to pre-learning. That's how you do pre-learning, is you make these big chunks of different topic areas that are going to come up. You try and layer some information onto them as you're understanding them. You want to draw things in like a diagram format so that you can remember them. The more images you can use and pictures you can use, the better. Again, I'm not going to claim this is the best mind map ever. I do think I could improve, but yeah, the more how you know your mind map is good is if you retain it, if you remember it, and I draw this mind map from scratch every now and then. That's what I was doing throughout the year. So this is like probably the 4th iteration of this mind map, and I was able to draw a good portion of it from scratch. That was showing that I was doing good, but then there was some areas that I couldn't draw from scratch, if that makes sense. But yeah, so that's what chunking is. And then inquiry-based learning, this is just important for when you're actually coming into the lesson and learning the topics, or watching the lecture or the video, or whatever you're using to learn, if that makes sense. So what you're doing the entire time throughout is you're asking, why is this important? How is it relevant to the other topics I'm learning? And then you're sort of drawing it onto that mind map. So an example of that, again, is, let's say, I mean, not everything works really well with this, but like when you do find something that works well, it really helps. So if we're looking at like the heart, I think I've got a better zoom in here. So let's say we were learning about the heart, and I was learning about this thing called afterload and preload, right? And then let's say that the teacher brings this up and starts teaching about it, and it says something about how afterload is, it seems to be like the reason of, I've sort of forgotten this because I haven't done this in 3 months, but I believe afterload is like the wall stress, just like how much stress is on the wall of the heart, right? And then preload is like the stretching of the heart muscle as the blood fills into it, right? And that's Starling's law, and it's important. And you have to think about why is Starling's law important, right? Because Starling's law is basically, again, like I was saying, it's when the blood fills in to the heart. Blood fills into the heart, and the walls of the heart stretch, right? So they go like this, they stretch. And then you have to think about, why is this important? Well, the teacher will tell you it's important, but try and think about it before, right? And think about, why could stretching be important? So I have some background knowledge in terms of muscles and stretch as well. I know that stretching causes sort of muscles to grow to an extent if you're stretching them under load. So like in the gym, you're stretching your muscle while you're lifting, then increases the amount of hypertrophy or growth that you get. So I thought, okay, maybe this can be related to that. The teacher then tells me, okay, so when it stretches, it's actually able to eject more, or I believe that was the case. Again, I might be messing this up, but when it stretches, yes, it's able to eject more, and the reason why this is useful is because, let's say someone has, well, not necessarily eject more, but also just like it keeps the blood pressure higher as well, and it keeps everything maintained, right? So let's say someone's losing blood volume, right? What you can do is you can give an IV drip. That's going to make more blood volume come in, and then that means there's going to be more blood or more fluid coming into the heart, so it's going to increase the stretch, increase the Starling's law or the preload, and that means, again, more is going to get sent out as well. So then that's going to link to all of these other diseases where, for example, the heart isn't pumping out enough, or things like angina, where there's like a blockage, or there's loads of different things that it's going to link to, if that makes sense. That's sort of how I do it, if that makes sense. And you relate the idea of blood. There's a whole section on blood that I had to learn about, in terms of the factors on blood as well. You can see all of these different links that we sort of make, right? And then again, that is very much related to, I mean, volume and blood volume is very much related to kidneys as well, so there's a big link there. But you build out this entire schema, and if you're very fluent in it and you're good at it, then you're going to remember it more. So again, I'm not going to say that I'm the best at this, because again, I think someone who's actually very good at this would have spent 208 hours and probably got 90%, right? If you're looking for like extra advice on this, everything I learned is from Justin Sung, and everything he sort of teaches is from the research that's done on study skills, right? So this is all research backed. This is not just making things out of thin air. But hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you can utilize this in whatever degree you're going into, and save yourself some time. I'll keep you updated on how second year goes as well. Again, I'm focusing a lot on my tutoring business, so I want to spend as little time as possible on this. I'm not very much interested in. I'm not that interested in medicine. It's just sort of getting through it, if that makes sense. But yeah.